income to our economy. And they are trying to cut also this possibility while they are trying to attend to this medical international cooperation that Cuba paid to many countries. We can continue. This is how much Cuba have lost because of the blockade. In 1 year, for example, from March 2024 to February 2025, the damage has been estimated 7,556,100,000 euros in 1 year. In 1 year. You can ask yourself how many problems Cuba can be solved if we have the possibility to wait this morning in food, providing food for the Cuban population, purchase oil to the national electric system to our country, or for example medication that we require, or many other transportation, and many other for education. Per month is 629,675,000, and per day more than $20 million per day. And if the cumulative damage in all these more than 60 years is 170,677,200,000. That's the quantity. And it is, I can say, superficial. We cannot count what is the cost of one human life. How much? When we lost children because we don't have the appropriate medication to combat the cancer, how much? So you cannot count in figures. And to finish, my friends, well, a part of this pressure that the US government is putting on all the governments, we are pretty sure that the international community is going to support once again this the resolution that Cuba is going to submit to the General Assembly next October 28 and 29, because the people do believe that the truth is in the Cuban side, and the Cuban population deserves the opportunity to live without this policy of the blockade, and to expand all the opportunities and possibilities that our political, economic, and social system assure for our population. Of course, we are pretty sure that India, once again, is going to support this resolution, as India has done in the last 32 years, and because we believe also in this strong relationship that this year is arriving to the 65 years diplomatic relation between the two countries. But once again, thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for attending this press conference today. And we, Lupe and Mikey, are open to answer any questions or to hear any comment from you on this topic. Thank you so much once again, and thank you to the Press Club for hosting this conference today. Thank you, my friends.
Journalist, I understand from your presentation that Europeans are being penalized by the Americans for visiting Cuba, but that's fortunately not the case for Indians. So in the last 10 months that you've been here in India, have you been able to figure out the reasons why only 20,000 tourists are visiting, or 20,000 Indian nationals are visiting your beautiful country, given the size of our country and the closeness between India and Cuba? Thank you.
You know that anytime I share with the people here in India, and they know that I am from Cuba, the first reaction is affection. You know, Cuba, oh God, yes, we would like to visit Cuba once. Isn't the desire of the Indian population, of the Indian people to visit Cuba? Is my impression. I know that it's very far, because to reach Cuba, you need at least 2 days. You can travel through Istanbul, through Paris, or Spain, or Amsterdam, or Italy. There are different connections, but it takes 2 days. And then 2 days back is 4 days. So the people see, in general, not only Cuba, Latin America, very far from India. And we should promote more the Cuba as I can say, an exotic destination, because Cuba has many things that for India will be amazing to discover in our country. First one, the population, because Cubans are very open mind. They are looking always to share with the people their opinion, and also the nature in Cuba has explained the beautiful nature in our country, the history, to visit the historical place, to visit the Che Guevara Memorial in Villa Clara, or the Fidel Castro Memorial in Santiago de Cuba, or also, for example, to enjoy the Cuban culture. Cuba is the capital of culture in the Caribbean, in the Central American region, because we have developed a strong cultural sector in our country in all the different manifestations. So the Old Havana is a World Heritage as well. So the people will enjoy, but we should promote more Cuba because of this problem of the distance, the geographical distance, which is a problem. Also, we have in Cuba an Indian company, which is in the tourist sector, is MGM Group, Mutu Group. They manage in Cuba more than 12 hotels, more than 8,000 rooms. It's the opportunity for Indian, because these hotels are located in all the countries. So I used to say that you can discover Cuba through the hands of MGM Group, and you can find also Indian foods, Indian restaurants in those hotels. So it's a possibility for Indian to travel. Also, we can promote Cuba as a place to unite the Indian family, because you have many Indians living in Canada, in US. Why don't you meet in Cuba? Or for example, for weddings. I am pretty sure that the family will spend a wonderful time in Cuba if you also organize the wedding in our country. So a few examples. We are right. We should do more in order to promote Indians to travel to our country.
This is Aditya Vadhavan from NewsX. My question to you is that we have been seeing that how this Trump administration is imposing tariffs on several other countries. I would like to know what has been the effect of these tariffs, these American tariffs on the Cuba in the recent times.
Maybe we are one of the only country in the world without tariffs from the US. But this because we don't have a bilateral economic relation with them. But this tariff war imposed a disruption in the world economy, and it's more difficult, for example, for us to purchase food and oil in any other country because the prices are going up. It's a problem. It's more for us. It's more difficult because also the international supply chain has been also facing difficulties. So in general, it's not in favor to any country this tariff war, including the U.S. citizens. They are suffering also the increasing of the prices within the U.S. market as well. So this is the answer that I can share with you. We are not bilateral, we are not suffering this problem because unfortunately we don't have economic relations between the two countries that could be in benefit of both countries. I remember during the Obama's administration that they decided to approach Cuba in another way, maybe with the same intention to defeat the revolution, I don't know. But they tried to approach Cuba in a different way. And we established more than 22 bilateral agreements with the US at that time. We cooperated in many fields, combating trafficking in drugs, trafficking in persons, in the preserved environment, in the Mexico Gulf of Mexico, in many things. Even we cooperated in science in order to find appropriate medication to combat cancer. And we established a cooperation between different cancer institutions in the US and in Cuba. So we did in favor to both countries. More than 1 million US citizens traveled to Cuba at that time. And when they traveled to Cuba, more than 90%, when they came back to US, they started to support that the US blockade should be lifted, because it doesn't have sense to have a blockade to a country so close to the US. So I think that we should recover this path of the normalization process between our two countries. It's in favor for the Cuban and the US citizens as well.
My question to you is, how do you envisage or the role of Indian government to help you get out of this situation, considering our age-old friendship, good friendship between India and Cuba since ages? Thank you.
On March, a Deputy Prime Minister of Cuba, Dr. Eduardo Martinez Diaz, visited India. He came to attend the Raisina Dialogue and the India-Lab Congress at that time. He met more than 5 ministers in India, in important sectors, biotechnology, health, in commerce, and they were agreed in order to reinforce the bilateral cooperation between the two countries. And more recently, in July, the beginning of July, in the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Rio de Janeiro, President of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, and the Prime Minister of India, Sri Narendra Modi, they met, and they were agreed also to enhance the bilateral cooperation, including in biotechnology, pharmaceutical, in ITC, and in many others. And unfortunately, I can say, both sides are agreed that the political relation is in a very high level, but the economic and cooperation relations should be, upgraded until the same level of the political relations. And we are starting cooperating in different areas, as I mentioned, in biotechnology. Cuba is offering now, Cuba has built a very strong biotechnological sector in our country. From the 80s, when few countries invested in this sector, Fidel Castro at that time realized that Cuba doesn't have many strategic natural resources, but the human resources are the most important in Cuba. And he said that Cuba should be a land of women and men of thoughts and knowledge. And he's invested a lot in biotechnology sector. And we now are offering to different Indian companies a transfer technology for some innovative products that Cuba have, for example, combating cancer or combating the diabetics, especially the diabetic foot ulcers, and many others, hepatitis B and others. In pharmacy, Cuba also recognized the Indian pharmacopoeia. It was recently, last June, and we are starting to cooperate more, I can say, stronger with India in this sector, buying very good and very quality products that you have here in India, but also Cuba could be a hub to produce medicine in Cuba for the Central America and for the Caribbean region as well. Also in ITC, there is a decision from India to share with Cuba some important platform as a part of the Indian stack. For example, we are suffering in Cuba these strong hurricanes. Nowadays, today, there is a hurricane that is close to Cuba, and in 2-3 hours, the hurricane used to destroy the infrastructure, first the human life. We lost the human life that we're trying to avoid, but also the agriculture, telecommunications, in many fields, the hurricane has a tremendous impact. And we are trying to cooperate with India because you have important digital solutions in order to prevent the people from these extreme natural events. And we are cooperating in many others. But we have opportunities in front of us. For example, in agriculture, you are self-sufficient, and Cuba has the land, a very productive land in our country. Indian company can invest in Cuba to produce in Cuba, and we hand over the land for a long period for them, and they can assure their financial income because they could export a portion of of the production could be export by free. So we are open to even to explore a more mutual bilateral cooperation with India in mining, in energy, because you have done also a great job in the energy transition in India. You have reached 50% of the energy production in India is through renewable energies, and we can also follow up this experience in our country with the support of India. So I think many opportunities, and I do believe that we can reach important results in the forthcoming month. It's our duties. We pay more than 90% of our time in order to reinforce our mutual cooperation. First one, I should refer to the history, to understand the topic. In 1868, Cuba started its fight for the independence. It took 30 years, and in 1898, when we were almost to reach the independence, through the sacrifice of the liberation movement in our country, the US invaded Cuba. They occupied Cuba for 4 years. And then, after this period, he offered to Cuba to recover the government, to establish a Cuban government, but with some conditions. And one condition was to accept the Platt Amendment in Cuba. And this amendment introduced more than 5 military bases in Cuba. One of them is Guantanamo base. But in the agreement was something unique, for the agreement said that this military base will be removed only if both sides are agreed. So through this condition, he assured that they will forever in this territory, because Cuban, from after the revolution, will immediately request to the United States to get back, to hand over this territory to the Cuban population, because it's a real order of that place. But they said not, because we are not agreed. And it was established in this agreement that was signed in 1902 at that time. So they should hand over this land to the Cuban population, that is, as I said, the real owner. And this population doesn't have military reason to be, because why? Just 90 miles from the US. You don't need a military bases 90 miles from your territory to assure if you want to attend to the national security of Cuba. And they are using this territory as a jail. They did when the Middle East war, and they are doing now, trying to relocate in Guantanamo these immigrants that they have now in U.S. territory. So I am 100% support your question that they should hand over this land that they occupy illegally in the Cuban territory. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to explain our position on this regard. The second is, I think that the BRICS are moving in the direction in order to have their own system of payment system among the BRICS countries, because the US dominance is getting to the end. Nobody would like to have this pressure, permanent pressure from the federal US treasury to impose their condition to the world. And we also are looking, trying to have direct financial relations with different countries out of the US dollar. For example, with Russia, we started also some the possibility to use in Cuba some cards. I don't remember the name of this card. MIR card can be used in Cuba. If a Russian visit Cuba, they could pay all the services in MIR card. We are doing the same with China, and we would like to also to follow up this route with India as well. We are pretty open, for example, to cooperate with UPI and our national banking system in order to establish some cooperation. So this is something that we, in the future, step-by-step process, we can approach India on this sense. Also because, for example, when Indians visit Cuba, they cannot use UPI in our country, and maybe it's an obstacle in order to increase the visit of Indians to our country. But we can agree. We can find a way in order to approach our two countries in the financial system in order to have more cooperation. We are also trying to open some bolster accounts in some Indian banks that allow us to buy here in the Indian market some goods and some services that Cuba also needs. So we are working very hard in this direction. Okay.
You have spoken about, relation with various countries, but you were ruled by Spain for some time. And what is your, trade and innovation or activities with the European countries? Because Europe is a very 27 nations together make most of the creativity in the world. So how is your relation surging with Europe, and what sort of Americans did that you fought a war with Americans to oust Spain?
With European countries. Remember that we were colony of Spain for more than 5 centuries in Cuba. Myself, my family came from Germany. In the case of Mikey, came from Spain. From which region Mikey from? From the Canarias. And in UK, Lupe, from where? Your grandfather? From Canada as well, and someone from Africa as well. So the Cuban identity is a mixture of different influences from Africa, because 1 million Africans went to Cuba as a slave, Spaniards because they discovered Cuba and they went in Cuba with the US president as well, and from the other different countries, from France, from Italy, from many. And we, in 2012, we signed with the European Union an agreement to reinforce our mutual cooperation between Cuba and the European Union as a whole, and all the European Union countries. And we have a change in many fields, including in human rights, in education, in food security, and many other fields. And we are in this cooperation with the European Union. Also, Spain has an important presence in the Cuban economy. For example, in the tourist sector, Spain is the most important. They are in Cuba managing more than 30 hotels, different Spanish companies in our country. And there are also some investments in the exclusive zone in Mariel. Some companies from Spain are participating, and some from Belgium, from France, from Italy as well are there. So our will is to continue growing our bilateral cooperation with the European Union. As I explained, more than 1 million Europeans used to travel to Cuba. I am sure that we are going to recover this market, because they really love to travel to our country, to Cuba. And it's just, there are flight connections from different European countries to Cuba as well. And we share some, I can say, some values with European countries. We work together in order to provide more quality of life to the people, to reinforce also the health care system in our country, the food security in our country, in preserving the environment as well.
Any code of contention?
Sorry.
Any code of contention? Anything which you didn't like?
Thank you to all of you.
So,
Including for the good
cup of
questions.
tea and small snacks is outside.